hand watering your plants doesn't have to be wasteful. There are various ways that you can ensure that your water is getting to where it's going. In this case here, I have an eggplant seedling that I just planted out, and I created a shaped trough for it that will hold the water for it. And although you can't get the soil level every time, what I like to do is use my hose end sprayer with the shower setting to shape the soil around it, and in that way level the soil. And then the water just goes where you want it to go and nowhere else. Unlike the case where if you hadn't created a trough to contain the water, it would just run off in all directions, and that would be wasteful watering. As the plant grows, I will enlarge this trough. Basically, you want to water at a plant's drip line, which is the end of where the foliage ends. Basically, when rain comes down, it'll splash off the leaves and drip down at the edges of the plant's reach, and that's where the roots are growing. So what you want to do is that's where you want to water, not necessarily towards the main stem, but you want to water out towards the drip line, because that will encourage the plant's roots to come out and venture into new soil, where it can find nutrients and additional space for root growth. And here you see, after only a minute or two, the water that had puddled in the trough has drained into the soil, which indicates to me that the soil is pretty well drained, or draining. That means that it'll be capable of holding oxygen, as well as allowing the roots an easy access to expansion. Some gardeners will tell you that overhead watering should be avoided, and that's true as long as you're planning on watering in the evenings or late in the afternoon, when the plant won't have time to dry off. But in this case, if you're watering, say, midday and you've got good breezy conditions, then it's quite all right to water your plants overhead, because by the time night falls, the foliage and the stems and the plant will be dry, and therefore it'll be impervious to disease-related infection that arises from moisture. Now, the one thing that you should avoid when planting or when watering from overhead is avoid any, or even hand watering, is to avoid splashing any soil up onto the plant or the leaves, because that is how you spread fungus and disease and bacterial disease to the plant. So there are a few caveats when watering your plants by hand, but as long as you're careful in certain respects, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. When it comes to watering, especially in a container, I like to take it slow. In other words, I don't flood my plants all at once and then just go inside for the day. I like to come in and add some water to the pot or to the watering trough, and move on to my next plant and continue watering the rest of my plants. And then about 5 minutes later, or whenever I'm done watering the rest of the plants, I'll come back and water the plants again. So in other words, I like to water the plants twice, because the first time around the water actually starts to penetrate the potting soil or the soil, and works its way into the large particles like wood bark and other parts of the soil. And then the second time that you water it, the water has a chance to penetrate even deeper into the media. A common mistake when watering potted plants is to water your plant very quickly, and oftentimes the soil on the surface of the pot will crust up, and what happens when you water what happens when you water too quickly is that crust will actually shed water, and the water will run down the inside and sides of the container, because oftentimes if the pot was allowed to dry out, the media actually shrinks, and so it creates a gap between the soil and the pot. So that makes the problem even worse. Oftentimes, when you bring home a plant from the nursery, you'll notice that there's roots all around the sides of the plant, and that most often is because at nurseries they often rush their watering, and they'll come through and just dump water in there, and they don't realize that the water isn't actually penetrating the soil. It's running off the top and down the sides of the container. As you become more skilled in your gardening, certain things just naturally creep up. For example, this is my watering station. It consists of 3 buckets, 3 5-gallon buckets that you can get at any hardware supply. And in those buckets, I like to keep them filled with water. And I also have all my watering cans around the area, because oftentimes it's easier to just grab a watering can and take it when you need to plant excuse me, when you need to water a plant in a hurry. It's a lot quicker than reaching for a hose. The other benefit of having buckets is that if you leave the water sit in there overnight, it gives the fluoride that they put in some drinking water systems a chance to evaporate, and therefore it doesn't get into your potted plants or your in-ground plants for that matter. Oftentimes fluoride is rumored to kill beneficial soil organisms such as bacteria, fungus, and other beneficial organisms in your soil. This is one of my watering cans. It's a small watering can. It's a half-gallon that I picked up at a local retailer here, and I like to keep it in my water bucket, because I can just come in here, dunk it, and I'm ready to go. So it makes it's a handy tool to have around. I also put labels on them sometimes. In this case, this had fish and poop fertilizer in it, but that's no longer valid, so I'll take it off. But you know, if you can reserve your watering cans for different purposes, depending on fertilizers or things that you want to add to them. This one's white. I also have a green one, and they also have a blue one. So these are 99 cents, and they're real handy. For bigger watering jobs, I have a, I guess, I don't know, this is a juice dispenser, or you know, like a tea dispenser for household use. These come in handy as well. Smaller plants that are in small pots or smaller plants need to be watered more often than, under the same conditions, need to be watered more often than plants in larger pots. That's because their root systems aren't as developed as large plants, and because they have less soil to hold moisture. So water them more often and keep a close eye on them, because if they dry out, your plant is likely to die. Plants should be watered more often when it's been windy or on extremely hot days, or when the weather is hotter than usual. You should water more often than usual, because plants transpire water from their leaves. In essence, they draw moisture from the soil using their roots. It goes up to the stem of the plant, and the plant transports that water and nutrients to the leaves, and then that moisture evaporates from the leaf pores. So when it's windy, that evaporation takes place a lot more rapidly when it's windy or when it's sunny. Ideally, you should water your plants until the water rushes out the bottom of the container, as you can see there. So the first pass in your watering, ignore any water that flows through. That's probably just runoff that hasn't had a chance to absorb into the soil. But on your second pass of watering, you should check to see that you've watered enough to run out the bottom. Proper watering is the single most important skill that a gardener can master. With small plants like this, you can bottom water them, because oftentimes there's seeds that you don't want to disturb. So if you water them from the top, you risk washing the seed out altogether, or at least causing it to be buried even deeper in the soil. So if you bottom water, if you keep all your pots in a tray like this, you can just add water to the tray, and that water will absorb through the medium, assuming that you have a medium that will absorb that water, because if your medium is a very fast draining medium, then it won't really disperse through capillary action. It won't disperse through the soil. This is a good watering technique for seedlings and pots that only have seeds in them. Most plants have specific watering needs. Some like more water, some like less water. This jade plant, for example, is a succulent, and most succulents don't need a lot of water. In fact, most succulents will tolerate their soil and their roots to be completely dry, and they won't suffer at all from it. In fact, that's recommended watering technique for succulents. They don't like a lot of water, so you have to let the water dry in between waterings, or the soil dry in between waterings. See, this jade plant here, I can tell by its weight is probably due a watering, but it doesn't really need much water, and that's about it. That's all it needs. In contrast, some plants like this hydrangea that I have here require a lot of water naturally. I have this one covered because it is a cutting that I got from another plant, and I've had it sitting in the shade and covered with this soda pop top, and what this does is it keeps a nice moist environment around its leaves. So while the plant's developing a root system so that it could actually get water from the soil, it it can actually absorb moisture from its leaves and its surrounding air, and that's why it's important to keep it covered like this. But hydrangeas have a natural tendency to want a good deal of water. That's why they're called hydrangeas. The word hydra is the root word of hydration, and that means water. So I don't think you could ever overwater your hydrangeas. With larger pots, watering is a bit more of a challenge because you can't just pick the plant up or the pot up. I mean, you could, but it'd be hard to really judge how much water is in there. You could also try to take a finger and stick it down into the soil and see if there's any moisture in there, but that doesn't get you very far because you've only got so much finger. So one technique is to take a wooden dowel or a chopstick, something that has some length to it that maybe would reach to near the bottom of the pot, and stick that into the soil as far as you can go, and leave it in there for about 5 minutes or so. Once you're done once the 5 minutes is up, you can extract your dowel, and you'll notice if there's any moisture and where that moisture happens to be. In this case, it was only in for a few seconds, but I can tell there's some moisture in there because I can feel it and I can see it, and so I'm pretty confident that this particular plant doesn't need any water at this time. More often than not, a plant that has tender foliage or leaves like this container zucchini will show signs of drought conditions. In this case, this plant needs water, and it needs the water badly. Now, this won't necessarily kill the plant, but it will stress it out to an extent. It's not good to let your plants dry out to the point where they're starting to wilt. A little leaf wilt is okay, but extreme leaf wilt could lead to the death of the plant and or loss of foliage. So let me get to watering this guy, and he should perk right up within 5 to 10 minutes because he's been bouncing back forever. He's got a lot of roots, and he's sitting in a small container, and so he dries out quite often. But as usual, he produces plenty of fruit, and he doesn't seem to die. See, there's a nice zucchini, and that's probably about the 8th one that he's produced. Potted plants in well-draining soil really can benefit from a saucer under the pot to catch the runoff. Not only does it catch the runoff and save fertilizer if that's what you have in the pot, but it also allows the fast-draining soil to absorb the water that ends up being caught by the saucer. So it also serves as a reservoir for water that the soil can't hold immediately. Now, the one risk to this is that you don't want to use a saucer and keep the saucer full of water for plants that don't like wet feet, because that'll kill them. I can think of a few examples, and when I do, I'll let you know. But there are quite a few plants that do not tolerate wet feet or wet roots. One of the benefits of using a measured amount of water when you water your plants is that you can benefit from the repeatability of that. In other words, if you use a half gallon for a particular plant every 2 days, well, then you know that every 2 days you need to water your plant with a half a gallon of water. If you're using a hose, you're not really sure how much water you're putting into it. So using a measured container is a good way to gauge a watering schedule if you want to take all the guesswork out of it. Still, that doesn't negate the need for observing your plants and making sure that they are getting as much or as little water as they need. The other benefit of using a container is that you can dispense fertilizer with it. Of course, you could do it with the hose end sprayer too, but that's really, really sloppy. You can add nutrients to a container of water and tailor it to the needs of your plant. So I'm just going to water this zucchini with my watering can. And what I'll do is I'll give it about a ½ inch of water so that it covers the surface of the pot, or the surface of the soil all around the pot. And that water is draining rather quickly. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom out and give you a better look. Okay, so as you can see, that water is draining quite well and quite quickly. There's still a little puddle of water right in there, but that's neither here nor there. Most of the water that I added, the ½ inch of water that I added, has already drained. I've got a lot of sand and clay in this particular pot, so more sand than clay, and sand doesn't hold a lot of water. So I'm going to add some more now and give it a chance to settle in. In the meantime, I've got my eye on the saucer at the bottom of the pot to see if and when the water starts to trickle out the bottom. So you don't want to water too quickly. If you take your time when you're watering, you can also do things like pull weeds that have grown in your pot and maybe do some pruning. Give your plant a good inspection, make sure that there are no pests or diseases growing on it. So you don't really have to rush your watering. You can actually use that time to tend to your chores in regards to keeping your plant healthy. So here I'm pulling some stems. That's on there tight. Okay, so, well, there's no water coming out the bottom yet, so let's give it a little more. I really like to flood this thing because it doesn't mind being flooded, and you know, it's a fast-growing plant and it's producing a lot of fruit, and it has a lot of surface area with these leaves, so it loses moisture very quickly. In any case, it's a very low maintenance plant. It's an Ostia container zucchini, and I highly recommend it to anyone. I've got more of these plants in a garden bed, and they are leaps and bounds larger than this plant, and they're a lot more healthy, and they have some gigantic zucchini on them right now. Let's go take a look. So here's my other zucchini plants, and I'm going to harvest one of the zucchinis off of here, which has gotten ginormous. Let's take a look here. Snap. Wow, look at this. This thing's pretty good sized zucchini there. Probably about 2 pounds. Well, it's been a few minutes and we're back to my container zucchini, and we're looking at the saucer at the bottom of the pot, and as you can see, water has just started coming out of it. And I've put in about a little more than a quart of water, so I know that the moisture holding capacity of that container is about a quart when the plant is dry. So I'm going to throw the rest of that water in there, and we'll make it an even half gallon. Whatever the soil won't hold will sit in the saucer, and the plant's roots can draw it up as needed. How fast or how slow you water your soil depends on how much clay content or how compacted the soil actually is. A compacted or clay soil will not absorb the water very quickly. As you can see here, the water that I'm adding to these plants is traveling pretty quickly downhill. In other words, not much of it is getting down into the soil and to the plant's roots where it's needed most. So just dumping your water on here real quick and heading inside is not a good idea, because if you were to dig up the soil, it would reveal that there isn't much moisture in it. So what you have to do in a case like this is water very slowly, either using a drip line or a soaker hose, or what I like to do is hand water very slowly. I'll come here and add a little water and go do some other things in the yard, and then come back and add some more water. And I'll do that until I have a pretty good sense of how much water the soil is getting. And you can see there's little puddles even in relatively flat soil where the water will puddle, and you can use those to gauge how quickly your soil is draining and adjust your watering accordingly. Well, it's been an hour since I watered the container zucchini, and as you can see, he's come back to life and the leaves are all perky due to the watering, and so now he is one happy camper. How do you like them apples? Asparagus. 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 Cucuzza. Seguir